Welcome back to the Cardano Source podcast. I'm your host, Blaine Edwards, and today we are joined by Phil Lewis, co-founder of Empowa, a unique decentralized property development and digital collectibles platform seeking to harness the power of community to empower people mostly excluded from the financial system. So Phil, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No worries at all. As mentioned in our little chat before I started recording, I'm really interested in, particularly excited about this podcast because it's like this weird combination of a number of important areas that I'm passionate about. So my background is in architecture, and I originally got into architecture, funny enough, because I wanted to get involved with designing and building affordable housing in emerging countries. Like that was literally why I started. I'm also very passionate about the environment because I think everyone should be, but I host a podcast outside of this, which is focused around conservation. And then obviously I'm a big Cardano fanboy, and quite literally, because I'm physically a very big Kiwi, and hence why I've got this podcast. But yeah, it's this weird combination of all these different areas, and Empowa seems to be kind of combining all these three things into one, like financially sustainable force for good. So super keen for this.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Well, it's a good plan. Yeah. It's a good dream. So we work backwards from the dream. But
yeah, exactly.
To kick us off, can you please do a little bit of introduction around who you are, your background, and what you do?
So I got into the Cardano ecosystem probably in about 2018. I've kind of been kicking around in different forums and got involved in some of the early test nets, like the pre-ITN Yorgaman testnet, and I've been in Catalyst since Fund Zero. I was actually one of Door's first guinea pigs on trialing the cool. voting app. So I've been around for a while in Cardano. I've got over 20 years experience in IT in general, more broadly, and I think the fit that kind of drew me to Empowa, and so much, I guess, how Glenn, my co-founder, and I kind of found that we had complementary experience was I've had probably for the last 10 years quite a lot of experience building large software platforms. So that's exactly what we're trying to do here with Empowa is build a large software platform. Mm-hmm. So I kind of brought that experience. Glenn obviously brings quite a lot of experience in the housing development space in markets in Africa, predominantly South Africa. So when we kind of came together on the Cardano forum and we kind of started talking about how we might be able to leverage the Cardano platform to be able to service that kind of market, we just hit it off.
So did you meet each other on Cardano
right.
somehow? Like how did
we met on the Cardano forum. Yeah. So Glenn just posted that he was looking for people to help him kickstart a project around housing in Africa. I've kind of been looking for projects within Cardano for a while that kind of would take my fancy, and I've had a few shots at a few different things that kind of some didn't really go anywhere. Some I'm still trying to get off the ground. But Empowa is the one that's kind of stuck the most, and is the one that I've obviously put quite a lot of time into. It's been most of this year trying to get it off the ground. So yeah, here we are.
Okay, so moving on to Empowa specifically. So from a high level perspective first, and then we can break it down. What is Empowa?
Yeah. So essentially, it's a platform that will allow funding or financing of housing construction in Africa. So one of the challenges that we're seeking to address is the inability for financing to get to people on the ground in Africa for a variety of different reasons. So obviously one of the biggest challenges is, I guess, informal employment, no credit rating, and so your traditional finance systems probably won't give a mortgage to the average person in Africa. So as an example, and we might touch on Catalyst a bit later, but our proposal in Catalyst talks about Mozambique, where we want to run a proof of concept. So in Mozambique at the moment, there are 30 million people and 600 mortgages, just 600 mortgages. That's it. So it gives you an appreciation for how difficult it is for somebody to get a traditional mortgage in places like Mozambique, and it's the same in other countries throughout Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So decentralized finance is obviously such a big thing, taking off in the crypto community in general. So we wanted to, I guess, take advantage of that so that we could get funding to people who aren't able to get it through the traditional financing system.
Mm-hmm.
And the main approach for doing that is essentially by selling NFTs. So the NFTs will act as a fractional ownership of the potential return that property can give. It won't give you a fractional ownership of the property itself because that becomes too complicated from a legal standpoint. It will be you are eligible to receive your share of the returns that this property will provide.
Okay. And just quickly on that, since that was the last thing you talked about, that fractional ownership is not of the property itself. If you get that NFT, correct, it's fractional ownership of any potential wealth that is generated from that associated property. What does that wealth creation kind of look like? Are you talking about like renting or?
Correct. Yeah. So it would be. So we will be working with partners on the ground. So in Mozambique, we've got a partner called Casa Real. So they're an existing affordable housing development company in Mozambique right now. And obviously, as an organisation, they experience the same challenges around getting customers who can afford to buy houses with a mortgage because of those challenges. So they currently run a lease-to-own model. So Casa Real still own the house after it's been built, and the person who's buying the property leases it, and that's over a 10-year period. Right, and once they've successfully leased it for 10 years, then they take ownership of that property.
Okay, lease to own. Okay. So going back to the problems real quick, so I can wrap my head completely around the problem. Yep. So there's a housing supply issue. So you mentioned in Mozambique, correct, specifically, which is where you're doing your proof of concept. There are 30 plus million people there, 600, so 600 mortgages.
Yeah. Not even 6,000, 600.
600. Okay. So for those who don't want to do quick math, is that roughly one mortgage per 50,000 people? Roughly.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. So that doesn't sound very, very right at all. From kind of that, you hear that statistic, and that doesn't. It seems like there's some issue there. So can we break down why that is happening? So if you're in a country with 30 million plus people and there's only 600 mortgages currently in the works, why is that the case? So you mentioned a funding issue. Can you break down maybe why that exists?
So as a traditional bank, and this applies everywhere in the world. It applies here in Australia, it applies in the US, it applies in Europe. A bank is deciding whether to give somebody a mortgage based on the level of risk that they've associated with that person. So can the person successfully service the mortgage? And there's obviously credit reporting agencies around the world in different countries that help banks to determine what level of risk that person might be. You know, have they got a history of successfully paying for things? So that's the problem that people in Africa are facing right now is that they don't have any kind of mechanism for demonstrating that they can service a mortgage, and therefore banks can just see it as too risky. Now obviously the other part of that is employment. So employment is not as formalized, I suppose, as it is in some of the other countries around the world, where you would have an employer who would have a more structured agreement and contract, I guess employer-employee contract that you can then take to the bank and say, look, here I've got a job with this employer. And then I guess the other aspect as well is land title, which is a big problem in Africa as well. So banks may not want to take the risk because somebody may or may not have land title, or land title could be disputed. So if they fund the building of a property on a piece of land, and then there's a title dispute, then obviously that becomes complicated for the bank as well. Okay. So there's quite a variety of different reasons that impact this.
Okay. So I can just make sense of this myself. So there is an issue with, first step is if you're trying to get out a loan, you go to the bank who have the money to give you. They need to somehow verify if you can, you have the ability to pay that back. And currently there isn't an infrastructure that is super clear on whether or not they can do that. Another issue is the identity around of the person, but also ownership. So land kind of ownership. There isn't necessarily super crystal clear who owns what. And from the bank's perspective, who's lending out the money, maybe that is an issue because they could foresee potentially a dispute in the future. Hopefully a Tyler Prism can help address that.
Exactly.
If they can go through those steps and they actually can get a loan, what is that mortgage rate, interest rate associated with that in a place like Mozambique, for example?
Yeah, so for those that are fortunate enough to be able to then get a mortgage, so they've obviously ticked some of the boxes, there are still other factors that will then impact what interest rate they will be charged. So these factors may not necessarily be about that person specifically, but more broadly around the country and the economy in that country. So obviously we hear stories about hyperinflation in different countries. Banks who are, I guess, getting their money from other banks around the world, those banks are increasing their interest rates to those smaller on the street banks because of those larger risks around the country itself. So as an example, and we highlight this on our website, in Zimbabwe, the mortgage interest rate at the moment is 45%. So, I mean, you can imagine trying to pay off a mortgage when your interest rate is 45%. It would just be almost impossible. It's not quite as bad in Mozambique, but it's up there. You know, it's in the mid to high 20s of a percent in Mozambique, and it varies across the continent. So, obviously, more mature economies like South Africa would have a more competitive interest rates, but then obviously other countries like Zimbabwe obviously have really high interest rates.
Okay, so on that, just as a comparison, so in Zimbabwe, the mortgage rate is 45%. In Mozambique, it's like kind of high 20s. I don't have a home yet, but the mortgage rate in Australia, I think on average is maybe around 3%, 2% as a rough idea.
2.5%, 3%. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a big difference between 3% and 45%. And so I imagine even if someone was fortunate enough to go through those steps in order to apply for a loan, they still may not be in a financial position to pay that level of interest. Okay, so
exactly,
that is a big problem, and that is a problem that you're trying to address. So in terms of, you mentioned fundings, what does that, in terms of what you're doing, what does that look like? So you are funding kind of developers on the ground in Africa. You're providing them with the capital so that they can do their thing. Is that kind of?
Yeah, exactly. So it now becomes a new source of financing, an opportunity for a new source of financing into these markets. So, you know, I guess the banking system, you know, we all think, well, how does banking work? You know, how does lending and borrowing work? And, you know, we think, well, I put my savings in the bank, and those savings are used to provide loans to other people. You know, that's kind of the school level, what we think we know about banking and how it works. But obviously the reality is it's a lot more complicated than that, you know. There's an opportunity now where we can say, well, instead of doing what we thought is the way banks worked, where we just put our fiat money in the bank and they'll lend it out, well, we can take control of that ourselves. We can actually help put our savings directly into some of these projects, and we have a closer relationship with that than just leaving it for a bank to decide who they should lend to.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah.
So the idea is, would you be bypassing the bank completely in terms
exactly.
of? Okay. I like that. I think that's a good idea.
Well, I think that's why we all got into crypto, was to bypass the banks as much as possible. So
yeah, 100%, 100%. Okay, so I've got clarity around the what you're trying to do. Can we dive into, I guess, the why? So why did you feel the need to co-found a project like Empowa? Like, obviously, as mentioned earlier, there's a social impact flavor, there's a environmental flavor, and then there's also a really good business opportunities. And there's also, we're leveraging blockchain, so there's a tech flavor there as well, and that's your kind of background. So was there one in particular that drew you into starting something like this, or was it like this beautiful combination of all these different things?
Yeah, so look, I think my background working in IT prior to getting into blockchain, I've always worked in industries where I feel it has some social impact. It's been an important criteria for me throughout my career. So I've had opportunities living in Perth to work for big mining companies and get paid quite highly to work for big mining companies, but I've chosen not to do that and have predominantly worked in health and education because I actually want to spend if I'm spending time away from my family to earn an income, well, okay, great, I'm getting paid, but at the same time, I actually want to feel like I'm contributing something as well. So when I met with Glenn, and he kind of put forward the idea that he had, which he'd kind of kickstarted without the blockchain in a previous job, in a previous company that he formed in South Africa. It kind of was just the right fit for me on a personal level, that it was going to have that social impact that is something I've sought out my whole career. So I think definitely the business opportunity that also presents itself from this as well. Obviously, it makes it a bit of a no-brainer because I think there's probably no reason why we can't deliver social good projects like this and I guess have to scrimp and scrape. People should be able to make money from doing these types of social good projects. But obviously we don't want to be exploitative like, I guess, the banks are now. So if we can provide financing to people on the ground in Africa, and so that they can get a mortgage, and even if it's 5 to 10%, so that's a 5% to 10% return for the people who are supplying that financing, which is obviously a lot better than we talked about, with just putting your money in the bank. It's also a lot better than the interest rates they're currently getting charged, and they can obviously have access to this, whereas they wouldn't be able to in a lot of the other cases. So it's it's a good opportunity from an investment perspective. It's a good opportunity, as you said, from a social impact perspective. And obviously the environmental side of it, as you said, everybody should want to support the environmental considerations. But look, if people are doing it without the social impact incentives perspective, or if it's purely just about the finances for them, then that's fine. We will encourage as many people to get involved as possible. There will be the side effect of their support of helping the environment and helping people on the ground in Africa. So
100%. I mean, if you are someone that is really interested or passionate about having a social impact or getting involved with environmental causes, if your mission is for that to be sustainable and scalable, there needs to be some sort of financial element that makes sense, that's built into that system.
Exactly.
So for me personally, my life mission is conservation at scale. And currently in conservation, the primary model is not-for-profits organizations. And to me, there is a bottleneck of impact and that bottleneck is caused due to cash flow. You're essentially relying on charity and donations. And if you want to scale your impact, there needs to be some economic sense in there somewhere. And like they can complement each other. Like they don't have to be contrary, like opposing forces, which I think a lot of people unfortunately view it as. Like you can harmonize the two in some way that is actually optimal for impact. So kind of a combination of all these things essentially is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in terms of blockchain, so what is the rationale for integrating blockchain into Empowa? So could Empowa exist without blockchain? And like, what are the unique benefits Empowa has through leveraging blockchain and also specifically Cardano?
So I'll answer the second part of that question first, and the why
Okay.
Cardano, because that's the easiest one.
Yeah.
Look, I think anyone who's into Cardano probably already knows this, but at the end of the day, I'm obviously, I come from a science background, so obviously the science aspect of Cardano is a big attractor for a lot of people. I have a computer science degree, so this kind of just makes sense. I have talked in the past about the fact that Ethereum was a great proof of concept for blockchain and smart contracts, but at the end of the day, they're replacing their own proof of concept with ETH 2.0, because it's proven that there's the opportunity there, but it hasn't been implemented in a way that's scalable. So that was the main attractor for me. But obviously, when we then add the African drive element that Charles Hoskinson has, there just seemed to be a perfect alignment from a community as well. So we were coming to a community that was already passionate about the fact that there was this opportunity starting to evolve around Cardano in Africa. So even without that, we probably would have been using Cardano, but obviously that's just a nice value add. The fact that there's already a bit of a community built around that. So why blockchain to get Empowa to operate, and could we do it without blockchain? Look, I think in theory it's possible, but it's not scalable. So one of the biggest challenges for us at the moment is the current backlog of 50 million homes in Africa. So if we were to build 500,000 homes a year, again, quick math, that's 100 years. Okay, so we're only going to service the backlog in 100 years at that rate. So this really has to scale. And the way to be able to do that is to decentralize this. It can't be Empowa as an organization being a bottleneck for every single housing development that happens through the platform. So it's about building a decentralized platform that people on the ground can leverage to start doing this themselves. They will be the ones creating the service providers in different countries. So we've partnered with Casa Real in Mozambique. So our hope is that other service providers like Casa Real can just start using the platform. They're not coming and asking permission to do this. They just use it. So they will submit a project to the platform, which will generate some NFTs, which then people can come in and buy. And all that happens without anyone from the Empowa as a company having anything to do with that.
I love that. Decentralizing this whole solution, and in doing so, decentralizing
the people as much as the technology.
Yeah. I love that. Sorry, those big when I hear something that really resonates with me, I kind of pause, and maybe that's not good for podcasts, but I'll work on that. As we touched on earlier, there's obviously this social impact flavor to this, but there's also not a charity, and there's a reason behind that. So there is some business sense to this. So can you elaborate more on, I guess, what the business model of Empowa is? Can you kind of touch on the business aspects around this? Like, how do you make money from this?
So how do we as Empowa make money, or how do people who help fund the housing make money?
Maybe we can touch on a few, like who is making money from this. Yeah.
So look, I guess in the first instance, Empowa as a project, building a platform that both projects on the ground can submit their projects to, have NFTs generated for, to then be sold to people who want to help finance those projects. there'll be an opportunity for us to make money from that by obviously taking a commission on transactions as they occur through the platform. So, in the creation of the NFTs, in the payments of rent, because all the rent payments will have to be processed back through the platform. So if a house gets built and we use the same lease to buy model that Casa Real are using, then somebody's paying rent into the system for 10 years. Okay, and so there's an opportunity for the operator of the platform to make a commission on each of those transactions. And then long term, once the last phase in our white paper talks about decentralization of the platform itself. And I guess that's where, think of it almost like Chainlink as a service, so multiple people can operate an Empowa node that will service the requests through the platform. So everyone would have an opportunity to make a little bit of a commission on the transactions that go through it, depending on who actually processes that transaction at that time. Mm-hmm. So that's, I guess, how the platform itself will make money. How will people who are contributing into the financing of the houses? Well, as we discussed earlier, the people paying the rent will be paying it back over a 10-year period, which will eventually equal more than the original amount of money that was paid to build the house. So, that's not necessarily, I guess, we just want to make sure that that's not seen as being, I guess, an exploitative element, because that's one of the big things. It's about we don't want to be extractive from people on the ground. So at the moment, rents in a lot of these, and this comes back to the housing shortfall, the rents in a lot of these jurisdictions at the moment are much higher than the equivalent rents would be in places like Europe and Australia. So there's an opportunity here to still provide returns back to the people who've helped fund the housing projects, and even drop the rents in doing so of the people who are paying rents currently. So that's probably the most obvious, I guess, way to get a return that people would appreciate now, because it's kind of similar to how people would think of an investment property now. You build a property and you rent it out and you make a return. There are other opportunities as well, and this comes back to how we're actually planning to position the NFTs. So if it's purely just an ownership of the return, if that's the only value that NFT had, then okay, that's great by itself. But we're hoping to include a different layer in these NFTs. So we're starting to ideate around how we might almost make these a bit of a collectible. So why do people collect these collectibles, like Pokemon cards or basketball cards? So people collect those. I guess pre-NFT days, piece of cardboard was a basketball card. I mean, what's the physical value of that? It's, cents, really, isn't it? It's not even $1 probably to make one of those. But socially, everyone's agreed that it has value because maybe there's a limited number of them, or it represents a special moment in that society. Maybe a particular basketball player who achieved a certain milestone. So there's reasons why people collect collectibles, and so we wanted to kind of tap into that a little bit as well and say, well, would people value a collectible that represents the impact that this NFT has had on somebody's life in Africa? So, if we can show that we've been able to take, a woman out of poverty in Africa, or if we can have this NFT represent some environmental impact that that house that was constructed has had, then people may want to collect that as a collectible, a type of collectible. It's not something that really exists at the moment, but we're hoping to shift people's view of what's important in what they value in a collectible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So I know often if you donate to some sort of charity, they may send you a card that acknowledges that donation. and that makes you kind of feel good. And then often they follow up with, look, this money that you donated, that ended up buying this. And then they send you a photo of that thing. And then again, it makes you feel good. There's some like kind of, you see the link between your donation and the tangible real world impact that had.
Exactly.
Is it kind of a similar idea to that?
Yeah. So these NFTs, they will be able to represent, I guess, the impact that they've had on people's lives. And it, you know, I guess in the first instance, we're talking very simple, you know, maybe give them a score around what kind of environmental impact, what kind of score it's had on a community impact score. Yeah. But longer term, you know, you can imagine what can we do with these NFTs, you know, so as an owner of an NFT, there are so many other things that we could do with that we probably haven't even thought of yet. So some of the things we're thinking about now are, well, we can link stories to these NFTs. So, you know, you might be able to get a, you know, 4 out of 5 star impact rating for the effect that you've had on the community by funding this housing. But how about all the stories that go behind that? The photos, the videos. How about some live streams? How about some AMAs with the people on the ground? You know, so the sky's the limit with the ideas that kind of are bursting out of our heads at the moment. They're just, you know, I mean, I can imagine a future where, you know, there's almost like a virtual reality where you could actually, you know, as the NFT owner, you have the privilege of being able to get into a virtual reality world and walk around these communities as well without having to get on a plane. You know, so there's so many different things that we could do.
Yeah, so much potential. Yeah, and I smiled because when you said impact score, that's an idea I've been thinking about a lot, also with my girlfriend. So I'm super passionate about conservation. She's super passionate about like humanitarian type stuff. And we've always, over date night, like most people, we talk about impact and social impact to changing the world. But one idea is this: if there was some way to quantify impact, if there was some way to measure impact, put it into some number that we can then plug into certain systems. But we could go on a massive tangent on that. So I'm not, but I just thought I'd bring that up because, yeah.
But you can imagine, you can imagine though that you see, you've got a double whammy with these NFTs, because not only have you got the stories and the impact that you've had, okay, but you've got a financial return coming back to this NFT as well. Now, what do you choose to do with that financial return? Well, some people might just cash it out. Great, I've got my money back. But some people might go, well, hold on, I could put this back in and boost my impact score. You know, I've only got a 4 out of 5 on this particular score. How can I put my money back into this community and actually boost my rating even more? And this then starts to get into the gamification side of things, you know. So, you know, if I've got a 4 out of 5 score and I boost it to 5 out of 5, well, someone might want to buy that NFT off me. I want a 5 out of 5 for the city of Beira in Mozambique, or I want to get a 5 out of 5 score for every African country. You know, I mean, I don't know why what people look for in sets of collectibles, but you can imagine there are a variety of appealing options that people might think about.
Definitely. And if we're going down that gamifying route, potentially there could be some leaderboard, and then you can kind of integrate social media and sharing your things, because when people do good things, often they like to share it with their friends. And maybe people are like, you should do without sharing it, but if you're doing good, like that's the main thing. I don't really care if you boast about it. So that's that. Before we move on, I just wanted to quickly go back to when you're talking about, so if Empowa is kind of this link between building developers, so you've got Casa Real as the building developer that you have at the moment, and eventually you'd love to partner with multiple building developers throughout Africa, and maybe like, well,
we have other partners in the works, because obviously Glenn and some of the people that he's worked with before have already got a network of partners, but obviously from a proof of concept we're focusing on Mozambique, but we've got plenty of other partners.
You've got plenty of
come on, hurry up, get this going, get this going.
Okay. So but you're the link between them and some financial capital, and you're ultimately hopefully bypassing the traditional banking system, because there's a lot of inefficiencies there. Okay, so when you provide this capital to these building developers at a, are you kind of, they pay it back with interest? Is that how it works?
So the rent that's paid
Yeah.
will then get paid back into the platform,
Yeah.
and so it gets paid back to the NFT. So you, as the NFT owner,
Okay.
also get that that financial return coming back to you. Now, if you sell that NFT, then any return that was due to that NFT gets sold with that NFT. So it it that transfers across to the new owner of the NFT.
Mm-hmm.
They will, from that point forward, get any returns.
And then the building developer takes the cut as well, since they're a chain in the link, or?
Yeah, so look, one of the things that we're actually looking at as well are ways that we can incentivize good behavior around the partners on the ground. So obviously, we want to be mindful of the fact that, well, some people could exploit this new source of capital and do bad things. So we want to be able to incentivize good behavior that and there's two ways of obviously doing that. One way we've considered is they have to have some stake. So and if you don't do right by the platform and the people who are due to get returns from these NFTs, then you lose that stake. The challenge with that, obviously, is that not a lot of these partners on the ground in these countries have much capital of their own to be able to put that up as stake. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation with that. So when we're looking at, I guess, instead of a stick, we're looking at a carrot. So is there an opportunity for them to, by seeing this through for, say the full 10-year period of that lease to own, that their return increases the longer they stick with that. If they want to just make a short, early exit and try and cut and run, well, they've lost this opportunity of sticking with it for longer because they wouldn't have got the returns early enough.
The NFT owner, the collector, is that?
No, the partner. We're talking about the partners on the ground. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we're trying to think of different ways to incentivize good behavior by them as well, because obviously that's an important factor in this, especially in a decentralized model where there's no one controlling entity. Like I said, Empowa isn't going to be the bottleneck for any of this. So
it's the
we've got to
catalyst.
Encourage good behavior. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of game theory opportunities here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
I mean, we haven't worked it out yet, but we know that we need to.
Yeah. Well, like even when you're talking about now, you can see that there are a lot of potential incentives systems that you can integrate into this. So I imagine there will probably be a bit of experimentation and fine tuning that the optimal game theory, so that the net benefit for all involved is maximized as much as possible.
And don't forget as well, we're using the blockchain, so that's going to record everybody's history. So if any party of any type, be it a partner on the ground, a property developer on the ground, if they have not fulfilled their obligations as part of this whole process, then that's going to be known to the entire blockchain. But the inverse of that is that those that do right, that will also be recorded. So it's essentially almost like a bit of a credit score process as well, not just for the project partners, but even the people going through the lease to own. So I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for them to be able to demonstrate that they are a good payer. It's recorded on the blockchain. I've just paid 10 years worth of a lease to own, and here's all the proof on the blockchain. I mean, what better credit score is there?
Yeah, it's kind of like a credit score system's built into the blockchain by default. Yeah,
exactly.
Is there any opportunities in terms of funding and kind of acquiring capital to integrate DeFi protocols, specifically like lend and borrow protocols, into your funding mechanism? Like, is there opportunities to do that in the future? So I guess you've got multiple streams of funding.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we're not closing off any possible avenue of getting funding into this, but similarly also funding that comes back out as well. So yeah, we fully anticipate that there'll be some integrations with DeFi platforms, so that there could be an opportunity to say to have a trading of these NFTs, or I guess some other mechanism that doesn't rely on the fractional NFT ownership to be able to get money into some of these projects. You know, at the moment we're looking at, I guess, the affordable housing market, and so, you know, I guess they're quite manageable chunks of capital, but longer term, I mean, this mechanism could be used. You could have a fractional ownership or a complete ownership of a large project, like a shopping center or something like that. So, you know, it's just a starting off point, but there are lots of other possible avenues that we could go down as well. And similarly with the returns, you know, so one of the things that we've talked about in the white paper is when you're getting your return, okay, it's attributed to your NFT. Now, you may choose or not choose to cash that out straight away. Now, if you choose not to cash that out straight away, well, it's pointless it just sitting there. So why not redirect it to some other kind of yield generator? So as you get returns from the rental payments, put that into some kind of DeFi platform so that it continues to then compound that wealth creation. And we even have gone really speculative on ideas and said, well, if an NFT owner does that, and we can still trace the NFT owner and that money that's now in a yield generator, well, why should the NFT owner be the only one that gets any benefit from that additional yield generation? Maybe we should push some of that back into the person who paid the rent. So there's an opportunity for that compounding effect to not only benefit the NFT owner, but the rent payer as well. So, you know, maybe they can share that wealth creation process.
Okay, and by rent payer, based on the lease to own model, that rent payer after X years will be the owner as well of that property.
Correct. Yeah. But
okay.
obviously, during that 10-year period, you know, they're paying rent. So, like, let's say after 5 years, you've paid 5 years worth of rent, and the NFT owner puts that 5 years worth of rent into a DeFi platform and makes another 10% on the rent that you've paid.
Yeah.
Well, we can actually track that, because the platform can be the one that sees that additional yield being created and go, well, let's share some of that additional yield creation back with the rent payer.
Okay, so there's a potential incentive there for the renter as well, just to assist them through. Obviously, after 10 years, based on that lease to own model, they will have ownership of that land. But obviously, 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another mechanism that we're also exploring as well. So one of the important criteria around this is an insurance mechanism.
Okay.
So obviously, in the instance way, I mean, the example that we give is, let's say there's a land dispute, so which is obviously a likely scenario. So the approach that we're taking from a housing construction perspective is we're actually looking at properties that are modular. So these are properties that could be constructed and deconstructed quite quickly. So in the event that there is a land dispute, we could essentially relocate that building to another piece of land, so that NFT owner who helped fund the creation of that isn't actually missing out on any rent. So part of the way that the platform will work is, as the rent is paid, a portion of that will be, obviously a very small portion of that will be carved off and put into this insurance pool. And this insurance pool will be shared across the entire platform. So if you can imagine, hopefully there's millions of properties all paying rent, and they're all paying a fraction into an insurance pool. So hopefully there's only a small fraction of properties that actually do need to use that pool, and, you know, if they have to be relocated for any reason.
Yeah.
So you've got this pool of money, and hopefully we haven't had to use all of it. Well, what do we do with that? So the idea is that if you are a rent payer, okay, and you've been a good rent payer for 10 years, there's been no land dispute, no insurance claim of any description to do that. Well, maybe the rent payer could have some of that back as a reward for being a good tenant for 10 years. So yes, they get their house, but I mean, indirectly they paid for that anyway. But by being a good rent payer for the entire time, they could take advantage of this pool of money that has been collecting, just as a hedge against anything that they might do wrong, which they didn't.
So interesting. So yeah, I think integrating that insurance part is definitely a wise move. And the more I hear you talk about this, the more game theory keeps popping into my head, because there's just so many possibilities that you could play this out, and that really excites me.
But I mean, the more we talk about this, the more you get an appreciation for the scale of this project.
The scale
is absolutely
and the
massive.
complexity.
You
yeah,
know, it is a huge undertaking, but we've basically said, look, we recognise that we're not going to hide from that fact, and it's not going to be something that says, well, we're not going to try just because it's complex. You know, at the end of the day, it's something that needs to happen, and all of these capabilities that we've talked about are not going to happen from day one. You know, so it'll be a case of, you know, building an MVP and then slowly iterating and adding more and more capabilities around, you know, things like redirecting returns into yield generators, or having this insurance pool, or there's so many different elements that need to be added, but it'll happen incrementally.
Yeah, it's definitely a big project. But my last podcast that I have, which I haven't released yet, was with WADA, so West Africa Decentralized Alliance. And one of the things that they said that resonated with me was today, or now, is the time to dream, essentially.
Exactly.
And if you got to dream, you might as well dream big. And fortunately for Cardano, we have this kind of built-in funding mechanism through Project Catalyst, which we'll touch on a tiny bit later on. But we can support you guys and this big dream of yours, this big project of yours through that. Plus also just kind of social media and spreading the word. But now's the time to dream. And fortunately, we have infrastructure that will allow us to achieve those dreams at a higher success rate than probably previously. I want to quickly touch on the social impact real quick, because I'm a big sucker for that. So obviously there's a housing supply problem, and if you can help solve that problem somewhat, then that's a good thing for the people buying the houses. But I imagine there's kind of more nuanced benefits as well, like building houses probably creates jobs. Like, can you maybe speak a bit about the social impact for those that have a particular interest around that? Like, how does this actually benefit the communities there? Like, strong community, strong economy, like these all go hand in hand. How does this kind of sprinkle out into kind of stronger communities through a project like Empowa?
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the things that we had on the previous version of our website was, you know, we had, you know, empowering, and then we would have, like, the word would replace, you know, it would be empowering communities, you know, empowering, you know, women, empowering economies. So exactly, you know, you've touched on that from the point of view of this is going to help these economies that are obviously struggling for a lot of the places around Africa. So I guess touching on what you were asking about, you know, how does this sprinkle out into other areas? So our partner Casarel, they've kind of highlighted some posts on social media and things like that around some of the employment opportunities that they've been able to introduce around the construction. And I think the last thing that they said was, I think for every house that gets built, it generates 8 jobs. So, you know, obviously 50 million houses need to be built. I mean, obviously not all at the same time,
once, but you know, you get
it. you get the numbers. You know, that's 50 million times 8. You know, potentially. So you know, the job creation is absolutely amazing. But I think the other thing that kind of stuck with me as well was the interview that the CEO of Casarel did when he joined Glenn and Alka from Empowa on Cardano Live. So the point that he made, because he's obviously on the ground in Mozambique, is that a house and a house that is able to resist some of the cyclone issues that Mozambique experiences has other, I guess, benefits other than just the employment that it generates. Obviously, there's the safety element around being in a structure that you know is cyclone resistant. There's the health improvement that having a secure house provides as well, and then obviously the flow on from that, the fact that people aren't having to worry about safety and health, they then start to worry about some of the other things that are often put to the side. And so the other thing that we see, or that the statistics show, is that the gains in education as well, because people now have the ability to start thinking about other things other than just their immediate safety and health.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm a big believer in trying to change the world, but I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can even spend time and energy thinking about that. Like if you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but essentially it kind of shows that in order to kind of get to a point where you can think about changing the world, there's a bunch of layers that you need to address leading up to that. And at the base layer, it's kind of surviving essentially. And a key part of surviving is having a roof over your head. So you talk about the fundamental human rights, it's food, water, shelter. The other ones that pop into maybe there's more. And if if there's a problem around having a house, even ownership of a house, like there's a lot of problems that we need to address leading up to this thing. And obviously, if we can address the bottom layers of Maslow's hierarchy, then we'll get to a point where we can focus on other things that are maybe outside of ourselves and our family. So, and it's quite tricky to, I think, quantify some of those things. So if you're solving the housing supply problem, maybe it's not necessarily like it's creating 8 jobs, it allows someone to have a home. But there are like an array of other positives that come from that we may not know, and we may not know until they just happen in the future. But the idea is you're addressing a fundamental problem that exists currently, and inevitably good's going to come from it. We may not be able to talk about exactly what a lot of those good things are, but inevitably, if you're addressing a root problem, a fundamental problem, an infrastructure problem, good things will just come from that. That's kind of just how it works as a byproduct.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're expecting that in addition to the housing construction partners that we'll have, there'll be a variety of other service providers that will pop up around this as an ecosystem. So there's going to be some barriers initially in interacting with the blockchain technology. So, someone has to pay rent into the platform. So, okay, hopefully eventually the rent payer will be able to pay directly. But not everybody will have that ability. So that's another example of a service provider that might pop up, almost like a property manager who will, I guess, go around and collect the rent for everybody who can't pay it directly themselves. And there's an opportunity for them to take a commission for providing that service. So
Definitely.
and that's just one idea that we've thought of. I'm sure there's so many other ideas that people on the ground who understand their environment a lot better will be able to think of that we've never thought of.
Okay, cool. Can we talk a bit about your Fund 5 proposal? There's a few more days left to vote for those that are registered, so I'm going to get this out ASAP. But can you talk about that proposal and how much money you're seeking and the key deliverables for that proposal?
So our Fund 5 proposal is, we've talked obviously about partners in Mozambique. So we're working with Casa Real to do a proof of concept. Now, we already know that they can deliver houses on the ground, okay? The difference with our proposal for Fund 5 is we want to do a proof of concept around the type of housing that we would like to promote the use of through Empowa. And this kind of touches a little bit on the environmental side of the project a little bit. So one of the challenges around, I guess, building 50 million houses is if we do it with bricks and mortar, that's going to be a nightmare for the environment because, concrete's not good for the environment. So we're working with I guess, construction providers who can provide housing in a environmentally sustainable way. So the partner that we're working with, along with Casa Real in Mozambique, is a company called Easy Housing, and so the structures that they have are CO2 negative. So they're using materials that obviously are carbon capture materials, but they're built in such a way that they use a circular modular process. So I guess for people who don't understand this idea of circular, people are obviously familiar with the idea of recycling. So if you want to recycle something, you take the raw materials and you break it down and recycle that material back into something else. But obviously there's work involved in doing that. Circular basically takes the components that were built and repurposes them to build something else. So by having them built in using modular components that are reusable, once that house or structure is no longer required, you don't have to break it down into its raw materials to recycle it. You just reuse that component. So that's quite an important feature. And obviously, what we want to prove with our proof of concept in Mozambique for Fund 5 is that there is a market for this, that the market will accept this type of structure, so that we can then have the confidence that we can move forward with the project, certainly in Mozambique, but then other countries as well.
Okay, so you got to use the funding from Fund 5 if you get voted.
Correct.
To, I guess, create a couple of these environmentally sustainable, carbon negative buildings in Mozambique as a proof of concept to say I can do this, and there is a demand there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're an investor who may want to consider getting involved with Empowa and supporting the construction of houses in Africa, if you're interested in a return, then what do you need to know? I mean, you need to know, am I likely to get a return? If I put my money in, will this actually work? And if Empowa haven't even proven that there's a market for this type of housing, then that's not going to give people the confidence. So it's about giving people the confidence that, we've done our due diligence on the ground. We've demonstrated and proven that there's a market for this, that we can actually build these. Someone will buy this house and through a lease to own model is prepared to enter into that. So we're building 2 houses. As we said before, this is not a charity, so it's not just something that the Cardano community are giving to the people in Mozambique. They will still be doing the lease to own, and the returns will be fed back into the platform, so that we can continue to build on the platform.
Okay, gotcha. All right, can we speak about the NFTs a bit and the tokens? Oh, so before we go into that, so yeah, if you listen to this podcast and you dig what we're saying, and you've registered to vote on Project Catalyst, then check out your proposal and vote for them. There's a few days left, and I'll add the link in the description, which is down there. I've always wanted to do that. Okay. NFTs and there's a token. Is there a token associated with this?
So there's a utility token. Yeah. So there'll be, in addition to the NFTs, there'll be a fungible utility token. So why have a fungible utility token? So one of the biggest challenges here is that we're building a platform that will be global in nature. So that's both global in that it's servicing people in different countries around the houses and the fact that they need to pay rent back, but also global in people who want to invest and buy the NFTs. So we wanted to have a token that carried a common unit of value regardless of where that value was being measured throughout the world.
Okay.
That wouldn't have external forces I guess, have an impact on the platform. So I guess as an example, consider if we were to use ADA. Okay, so ADA as a price can be influenced by things that for whatever ADA is used for. So it's going to be used in so many different projects around the world. So if those other external influences were affecting the price of ADA, then that would have an impact on our projects. So by having a token that is purely for the Empowa platform, it means that only the ecosystem around Empowa can influence the price of that token, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are you going to be, when you're raising capital, will that capital be converted to this sort of token in order to provide the property developers, or?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So, so let's say, for example, let's go through the flow. So, I as a I've got $1,000 that I want to help build some property with. So I come to the Empowa platform. Excuse me. I say I want to buy $1,000 worth of NFTs. I can do that with the EMP token, which is the name that we have for the fungible token, if I own some. But if not, and obviously we want to target people who are more than just the crypto community here. We want to target the entire world. So anyone who wants to help with this should be able to do so without even knowing that they're using blockchain. It might just be a case of, okay, I want to pay with PayPal or my Visa or MasterCard. That process will go and source EMP off the market to be able to then buy the NFTs with EMP. So whether you've come with your own EMP or whether you've come with another currency like ADA or US dollars, it will get converted into the EMP token, which will then purchase the NFTs. Those tokens will then be locked in the platform so that it can essentially provide liquidity to a stable coin for the country where the house is being built. So let's say it's in South Africa, then I think it's Rand, is it, in South Africa, the currency? So, some stable coins would be provided to the builder in South Africa, who would then go away, build the property. People pay their rent, okay, in that currency. It needs to be converted back into the EMP. Okay, now this is the important reason why we're locking the EMP in the platform at the time of the house being funded. Let's say the exchange rate between EMP and Rand at the time the house was built was, I don't know, maybe 1,000 Rand to one EMP. This is going to be happening for 10 years. Somebody's going to be paying rent for 10 years. So if there are any fluctuations in the price between Rand and EMP across that 10 years, that's going to potentially dilute the returns back to the original NFT owner. So by locking it in the platform, when they pay their rent, they're actually drawing back on that supply of EMP so that it can be paid back at the same exchange rate that was
set at the original
used to
contract.
generate them in. Exactly, yeah. So
Okay.
it's an important feature that we need to have to ensure that there's no, loss to the original investor over the 10-year period.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, if you're talking about a time frame of, say, roughly 10 years or so, there's potentially a lot of volatility that can happen in that time scale. So,
and it could be on either side. It could be
on either side.
Yeah, it could be on the EMP token itself, or it could be on the fiat currency in the country. We obviously see inflation happening in different places, so we're obviously trying to limit the impacts of that for the investor.
Yeah, definitely. And from an investor point of view, if you kind of go into that contract and there's kind of like some fixed exchange rates at the very beginning, you also talked about potentially integrating some kind of rewards into this, where rewards kind of fed back to the renters and the NFT collectors. If there's any potential upside, like an increase in price, and you get those rewards, then you still get those benefits of those increase in rewards.
Of course.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So you're kind of you're kind of mitigated from that risk of any negative volatility, but then through is it kind of like a passive rewards in a way? Like it could potentially be some sort of passive stream of income that if the price go up, then you can benefit from that as well.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I guess when the rent gets paid back at the same exchange rate, it now lives in the platform as EMP. Okay, so that is no longer locked to a particular exchange rate at that point in time, because it only needs to live in the platform as EMP tokens. If that's then used to go into the insurance/reward pool, or whether it goes into a yield farm somewhere to make additional income, then that can be done in such a way that it leverages the market volatility positively or negatively. The locking mechanism around the construction price and the rental return price, that's the primary volatility that we want to mitigate against, because even if they don't try to get additional rewards anywhere else, they should at least get back what they originally paid in at the price that they paid in at the time. Now, once they get their EMPs back, if the price of an EMP has gone up since then they'll probably sell that. But similarly, the EMP might have gone down since then as well. So they may choose not to sell it at that point. But the point is that regardless of where EMP is at that point in time, they're not getting less EMP returned to them than they originally paid. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And for those that want to get their hands on some tokens, are you doing some sort of token pre-sale or token generation event in the near future that people can keep an eye on?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment we're currently in our private sale period, but we are planning to do a public sale at some point in the near future. Now, there's potentially two ways that could happen. We're looking at, I guess, just a traditional token sale, as everyone is used to. But we are also exploring the possibility of doing what people have termed an ISPO, I think it is, the initial stake pool offering. So we know that a few different projects are considering this. So we would like to give people the opportunity to get access to tokens that way if there is a desire. I mean, there obviously is a desire for some other projects. So we've asked the question of the community. There's a page on our website where you can register your interest for either just a standard token sale or whether you would like to participate in an initial stake pool offering. So if there is enough interest in doing the ISPO, then one of the differences potentially in how we would do it is we would like to do it in partnership with some African stake pool operators. So we're conscious of the fact that if people are standing up stake pools to do this, I guess, token exchange process, that in doing so they're draining stake from other existing community stake pools. Which has been one of the, I guess, the backlash that some other projects have received. So we don't necessarily want to have a negative impact on the existing community stake pools. So we would like to, I guess, give the existing African stake pool operators the opportunity to host these stake pools for us, so that they will continue to get something from doing that for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the ISO, the ISPO, it's definitely kind of a popular trend at the moment, and there are different ways to go about it. And I know MinSwap, for example, is looking to do adding another letter to the acronym. They're doing a FISO, Fair Initial Stake Pool offering. And they're doing similar thing to what you just mentioned. So they partner with a number of stake pool operators, and then so we stake to them, so they kind of get benefits as well. And then you also acquire the token through that, which I really, really, really love that kind of idea. And from that level, I'm pretty curious to see how that evolves as well, because there's heaps of possibilities how that could evolve and get better.
So look, if that happens and people are interested in getting access to the EMP token via ISPO, hopefully we can partner with some African stake pool operators who will not lose any kind of fees that they would be getting from hosting their own stake pools. But I guess one of the other things that we're considering as well is there's an opportunity beyond our token sale This could also be an opportunity as part of a way to get access to NFTs, to actually fund the NFTs for the platform as well. So by delegating your stake to a stake pool, you wouldn't get an EMP token, but you would get an NFT which has helped fund a house. So it could actually be a mechanism not just for doing the token sale as part of building the platform, but also a fundraise for different housing projects as well.
Yeah, so just to add to that, so the NFTs, so people buy the NFTs, and the NFTs
Correct.
are used, the money from that purchase are used to build these homes.
Correct. Yep.
Yep. And the owner of that NFT has fractional ownership of any future wealth creation from that associated building.
Correct.
Through rent
Correct.
or otherwise.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the original idea was that you would come to the platform and you would buy an NFT. So you would buy an NFT either with a fiat gateway, or you would buy it with ADA, or you would have EMPs and you would just buy it directly with EMPs. But if you could also buy an NFT just by staking to a stake pool, then all of the proceeds from that stake pool would be going into actually funding the housing.
Yeah, and also cleverly, you guys are trying to. So obviously, in NFTs, a lot of people are buying just NFTs as kind of these collectibles, like NBA Top Shot, blah blah blah. But then NFTs have infinite use cases, really, and one use case is using it to tokenize some physical asset like a home, and you're kind of trying to marry the two of them. So if you can create an NFT that is treated as some sort of collectible, where there's value in it just being a collectible for whatever reason that is, and then that is also linked to some physical asset, and that is used to fund that the creation of that physical asset. Yeah, that is potentially really, really powerful if you could get that, if you can integrate that collectible desire somehow, whatever that looks like. There's
it's difficult. It's difficult to get your head around because it's such a new way of thinking about things. But people we've spoken to like the idea. They think that people would get on board with that as a new way of thinking of a collectible. It's just that obviously we all know what a collectible looks like now, and it's usually, I guess, I don't want to use the word superficial because it makes it sound, but they don't have any real, substance to them necessarily. I mean, they obviously do have substance to the people who collect them. They have some real meaning, but I think there's an opportunity here to give something that has meaning, which has some real world. I can actually see, what the effect has been. Like I said before, we're just looking forward to being able to link stories to these NFTs. Because I think as we start to do that, people will be able to get their head around it a bit more and go, this is what I'm getting from this NFT. I'm getting this deep story which could last for 10 years. Yeah,
that stories is powerful. Like stories are extremely. Everything's a story, like if you spin it in certain ways. But when you're saying how if you have an NFT and maybe you could go on some virtual reality tour through that community and maybe interact with the people there virtually or even over Zoom or somehow, like that could create a really powerful connection.
I mean, think about a story where we help fund a house for a single mum, in an African country. And over that 10-year period, she raises her kids. She's able to send them to school because she's got, a secure home. And the story continues where, her child goes to university and becomes a doctor. Imagine that story directly linked to that NFT. And while it doesn't mean that wouldn't have happened without this funding of this, this NFT, there's a chance that it might not have, and so that's so powerful, to be able to know that you helped contribute to that, and you own the thing that will continue to have access to that story.
Yeah, so from the person buying the NFT, the collector at the beginning, being able to see that progress will make you feel kind of good and may inspire you to do it again, because you can actually see how this donation turned into this. But just going back to when you're talking about this impact score and the challenges around quantifying impact, if everything's tracked on the blockchain and then you can actually track this equals this, then it makes it a lot easier to quantify these things. Because we, maybe back in the day, if we buy a card and somehow the person selling that card, they use that money to fund their children going to university, and that person may have turned into the president of the United States or something. Back in the day, there was no way to link you buying that trading card with funding the next president of the United States, who influences all the systems, or like has a say, an influential force in the world economy.
Wow, your story is so much bigger than my story.
No, but the idea is quantifying impact is cool. And now it's a lot easier now, because we can track all these different variables that affect that impact. But that's a tangent. But we're almost done, and you said that we could maybe speak for, I think we've gone over a bit over an hour, so we'll wrap it up. I could literally talk for hours about this, but I'll wrap it up for the sake of keeping it short.
People listening.
Maybe we could do another one later. How can people, so 2 questions, how can people connect with Empowa and support your work?
So on socials, Empowa_IO on most socials. So that would be Reddit, Twitter, Telegram, or Empowa.io on is our website. So they're the ways to keep across what's happening and get in touch. Anyone who wants to get involved, obviously suggest jumping in our Telegram chat and letting us know what interests you about the project. You know, we're all about the stories, so we want to hear about why people would like to be involved in this project, as much as just the fact that they do. You know, not just that I want to be, but okay, tell us why. You know, so we're starting to actually get people tell us some stories in our Telegram chat as well, which is great.
Cool. Yeah, and obviously voting for you guys on Fund 5 as well, for those that are eligible to do that. So that's a massive one as well.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I think it's got, how long has it got left? I think not too long, I don't think. Is it?
I think 2nd of August. Right. I mean, not 2nd of July, August. Yeah, 2nd of, I think. Yeah, 2nd of August. So I'm going to...
that would be really good. People could vote.
I've got to try and get this out. I'll try and get it out tomorrow. So I'm posting one today, and I'll post another one tomorrow, just for the sake of giving people time to learn about your proposal if they haven't already, and ultimately vote. Last question. It's a bit of like a airy-fairy one, but I'm a bit of a dreamer like that. It is, what excites you the most about the future of Cardano?
Look, I don't know whether I've just been around in the community that long that I've drunk the Kool-Aid, you know, but and obviously I have, because, you know, I've helped start a project that is doing the same thing. But I just love the vision and the opportunity that Cardano can bring to, I guess, empowering people who have been disadvantaged by, I guess, a system that's gone awry, we could say. You know, what we value in life has kind of been hijacked a little bit. So I think the tech is just such a small element of that. I think the community has been the thing that has really got me the most excited about Cardano, because being around on different forums and things like that, you know, we've seen some trolls come into some of the different forums and chats, and the community is, I think, quite grounded, in as much as it's not just about, you know, ADA to the moon. It's just about if you don't want to be involved in a project that is going to make people's lives better, then there's plenty of other cryptocurrency projects out there. I think that to me is the thing that excites me the most about Cardano. It's the community.